The throne room of the Valkyrie Imperial Palace stretched toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Its walls carved from stone that had witnessed 10,000 years of history. Jinho walked beside Sereth through those ancient halls, feeling impossibly small beneath the weight of so much time. 3 weeks had passed since the Battle of Varus IV, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Dreketh Collective had retreated, their invasion postponed while they reassessed the unexpected alliance that had formed against them. But that alliance remained fragile, and its fate would be decided here. In the heart of Valkyrie power, Emperor Kethvaris sat upon the obsidian throne, his scales gray with age, but his eyes sharp with intelligence that had guided his empire for 2 centuries. Around him stood the nobles and commanders of the imperial court, and Jinho could feel their gazes upon him like physical weight. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with contempt, and a few with something that might have been grudging respect. Sereth had warned him that this would be difficult. The conservative factions of the court had not forgotten that their crown princess had exceeded her authority, had committed imperial forces without full sanction, and had elevated a human to near-sacred status. They demanded answers, and some demanded punishment. Princess Sereth, the Emperor spoke, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. You have been summoned to explain your actions at Varus IV. Sereth stepped forward, her posture straight and her expression calm. I have nothing to explain, Father, she said. I acted in accordance with the ancient laws of our people. I honored a blood debt owed to one who saved my life, and I brought glory to our warriors through victory in battle. A noble from the conservative faction stepped forward. His name was High Lord Vethras, and his contempt for younger species was legendary. You committed the Imperial fleet to defend primitives, Vethras accused. You sacrificed Valkyrie lives for humans, creatures barely worthy of the name sentient. Those creatures held the line beside our warriors, Sereth replied. Those creatures fought and died, defending not just their own world, but our wounded and our fallen. I watched human soldiers carry injured Valkyrie to safety when they could have fled. I watched human healers work through the night to save warriors they had never met. She turned to face the court directly. I have served this empire my entire life, she continued. I have led fleets and won battles and brought honor to our name. And I tell you now that what I witnessed on Varus IV was worthy of respect. Respect, Vethras scoffed. For a species that has existed for barely a heartbeat by our standards? They are children playing at civilization. Then perhaps we should learn from children, Sereth said. Because somewhere in our 10,000 years of glory, we forgot something essential. The court murmured at her words. We forgot what it means to show kindness without calculation. Sereth continued. We forgot what it means to help those who cannot repay us. We became so consumed with our own superiority that we lost the very virtues that made us great. She gestured to Jinho. This human taught me that lesson 15 years ago, she said. When I was wounded and alone on a primitive world, when I was certain that I would die forgotten and unmourned, he found me. And he did not ask who I was or whether I could benefit him. He simply saw a child in need and he helped her. The Emperor had not spoken since his initial words, but his eyes had never left Jinho. Approach, the Emperor commanded. Jinho walked forward on legs that trembled slightly. Stopping at the base of the steps that led to the throne up close, the Emperor seemed ancient and eternal. A being from a different age looking down at this strange creature who had somehow become important to his empire. Human, the Emperor said. My daughter has told me much about you. She has told me how you defied armed warriors of our own kind rather than surrender her to unknown harm. She has told me that you asked for nothing in return. I did only what anyone should do, Jinho replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. That is precisely the point, the Emperor said. You believe that such actions are ordinary. That kindness to strangers is simply what people do. And my daughter tells me that many humans share this belief. Most do, Jinho said. We are not always successful at living up to it. But most of us try. The emperor was silent for a long moment. I have ruled this empire for 200 years. He finally said, I have seen species rise and fall. I have witnessed the cruelty of the Dreketh and the indifference of the galactic community. And I had begun to believe that the universe was simply cold. That kindness was a weakness that evolution would eventually eliminate. He rose from his throne. But my daughter defied me. The emperor continued. She risked her position, her honor, her very name, because she believed that a simple act of kindness deserved to be repaid. And when she called for aid, warriors from across my empire answered. He descended the steps slowly, his ancient body moving with deliberate care. Do you know why they answered? He asked Jinho. Because of Sareth, Jinho guessed. Because of her story. Because of you, the emperor corrected. Because when she told them about the human who had saved her, they recognized something they had forgotten existed. They recognized honor of a kind we had convinced ourselves was naive and foolish. He stopped before Jinho, and the throne room fell utterly silent. Then the emperor of the Valkyrie performed the warrior salute, fist to chest, and bowed his head to a human farmer. The court gasped. I name you kin, the emperor spoke. The same words Sareth had given 15 years ago. My blood answers to yours, and so answers the blood of my empire. Jinho did not know how to respond, but the emperor did not seem to expect words. The alliance between our peoples is ratified, the emperor announced. Turning to face his court, let it be known throughout the galaxy that the Valkyrie stand with humanity, not because of politics or strategy, but because one human proved that some bonds transcend species. High Lord Vethris looked as if he wanted to protest. But the emperor's word was law, and the matter was settled later. After the ceremony had ended and the court had dispersed, Jinho stood with Sareth on a balcony overlooking the Valkyrie capital. The city stretched to the horizon. Towers of crystal and stone rising above streets that had known 10,000 years of history. Ships moved through the sky like silver fish swimming through an ocean of air. I never imagined any of this, Jinho said quietly. When I found you in that field, I was just trying to help a hurt child. I never thought it would lead to wars and empires and treaties that would reshape the galaxy. Do you regret it? Sareth asked. Jinho considered the question carefully. He thought of his quiet farm, now abandoned in the chaos of war. He thought of the peaceful life he had built for himself, now transformed into something he barely recognized. He thought of the weight that had settled on his shoulders, the expectations of two species looking to him as a symbol of their alliance. And he thought of the little girl with silver scales and frightened eyes, the child he had carried through a storm. No, he said. I would do it again without hesitation. Sarah smiled, and in that moment, she looked both like the princess she had become and the child she had been. I know, she said. That is why my army knows your name. She placed one of her hands on his shoulder. The war is not over, she continued. The Dreketh will return, and the battles ahead will be harder than anything we have faced. But we will face them together, human and Valkyrie, because you taught us that we could. Jinho looked out at the alien city, at the strange stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, at the future that waited beyond the horizon. He was just a farmer who had shown kindness to a stranger, but sometimes that was enough to change everything. Together, he agreed, and across the galaxy, humans and Valkyrie began to build something new. An alliance forged not in politics or necessity, but in the simple, powerful truth that kindness given freely is never truly lost. It echoes through time, through lives, through the vast reaches of space itself, and sometimes, years later, it comes back to you. The sky above Varus IV burned with the light of dying ships as the Battle of Varus Jinho stood in the command center of the colonial capital. Surrounded by screens showing the chaos unfolding in orbit, the Dreketh had arrived in force. Their vessels dark and angular like blades designed to cut through the stars. And they had attacked without warning or demand for surrender, 200 ships against 140. And the mathematics of war favored the enemy. But the Valkyrie had fought outnumbered before. And they fought now with a ferocity that made the Dreketh hesitate. Sarath's voice crackled through the communication system. Her command sharp and precise as she directed her fleet from the bridge of her flagship, Fourth Wing. Close formation around the human carrier group, Fifth Wing. Execute flanking maneuver on the Dreketh left. Jinho watched the display as Valkyrie ships moved like dancers. Their movements coordinated in ways that human vessels could not match, but the humans fought too. Their ships slower and less advanced, but crewed by people who understood they were defending their homes. Admiral Kwan's voice joined the chorus of commands. And Jinho marveled at how quickly the two fleets had learned to work together in the streets of the colonial capital. Valkyrie warriors stood alongside human soldiers, guarding evacuation routes as civilians fled to underground shelters. Jinho had been assigned to coordinate ground operations, to serve as translator and liaison between the two forces. He had protested that he was only a farmer, that he knew nothing of war. But Sarath had insisted, "My warriors will follow you," she had said, "because I follow you. Because you are the reason we are here." Now he watched a squad of Valkyrie soldiers escort a group of human children toward the nearest shelter. Their four-armed forms moving with surprising gentleness, despite the chaos around them. A little girl had lost her parents in the confusion, and one of the Valkyrie had lifted her onto his shoulders and was carrying her to safety. Jinho thought of Sarath as a child, alone and afraid. And he understood that she had not just learned from him. She had taught her warriors to see humans the way she saw them. The battle in orbit raged for hours. The Dreketh pushed forward relentlessly, their ships designed for brutal efficiency rather than grace. They outnumbered the Allied fleet. And slowly, inevitably, they began to gain ground. "Evacuation transports are launching," Admiral Kwan reported. "We need to buy them time to reach safe jump distance," on the display. Jinho saw the vulnerable human ships rising from the planet's surface, filled with thousands of civilians who had no means to defend themselves. The Dreketh saw them too, enemy vessels breaking formation. Sarath reported, her voice tight. "They are targeting the evacuation fleet." Jinho's heart clenched as he watched Dreketh. Warships turned toward the defenseless transports. If they reached those ships, thousands would die. Sarath, Admiral Kwan said. "If we move to intercept, we lose tactical position. We will be exposed to their main battle line." The communication channel fell silent for a long moment. When Sarath spoke again, her voice carried no hesitation. "All Valkyrie vessels, form defensive perimeter around the human evacuation fleet," she commanded. "We will shield them until they reach safe distance." "Princess," one of her captains protested, "we will take severe casualties if we break formation." "I am aware," Sarath replied. "Execute the order." The Valkyrie fleet moved as one, abandoning their tactical advantage, to place themselves between the Dreketh and the fleeing civilians. Jinho watched with something between terror and awe as warrior ships that had fought for 10,000 years positioned themselves as living shields for humans they had never met. The Dreketh weapons fire found them quickly. Valkyrie vessels blazed and died, their crews sacrificing themselves to protect people who had been strangers to their empire mere days ago. Jinho counted 4 ships destroyed, then 7, then a dozen. Each one represented hundreds of Valkyrie warriors who would never return home. But the transports escaped. Every single civilian ship reached safe distance and jumped to hyperspace, carrying thousands of human lives to safety. Sarath had saved them all. The evacuation is complete. Admiral Kwan reported. And there was something new in her voice, something that sounded almost like reverence. Then we hold, Seraph replied. We hold until we cannot hold anymore. In the streets of the capital, the ground forces fought their own battle. Dreketh drop pods had begun falling through the gaps in orbital defense, deploying soldiers to hunt the remaining civilians and destroy infrastructure. Jinho found himself at the center of a defensive position. Valkyrie and human soldiers fighting side by side against the advancing enemy. A young human private named Yu Min-su crouched beside him, fear evident in his eyes. I thought the Valkyrie hated us, Min-su whispered. Every report I ever read said they considered humans worthless. Jinho watched as a Valkyrie warrior threw herself in front of a wounded human soldier, taking a plasma bolt that would have killed him. The warrior fell, and her companions roared with fury, pushing the Dreketh back with renewed ferocity. They did not know us before, Jinho said. Now they do. The ground battle lasted through the night, and when dawn finally broke over Varus 4, the Dreketh forces had been pushed back to their landing zones, in orbit. The situation had stabilized into a tense standoff. The Allied fleet had taken heavy losses, but the Dreketh vanguard had been bloodied badly enough that they no longer pressed their attack. Then the sensors detected new signatures emerging from hyperspace. Jinho held his breath, fearing Dreketh reinforcements, but the identification signals that came through the communication system made even the stoic Valkyrie warriors cry out in disbelief. 50 Valkyrie ships had arrived, then 100. Then more fleet after fleet dropped out of hyperspace, their commanders broadcasting their loyalty to Crown Princess Sareth and their support for her alliance with humanity. This is Fleet Commander Vithor of the 7th Imperial Fleet, a voice announced. We have come to honor the debt of blood. Show us where to fight. Similar messages flooded the channels as ships from across the Valkyrie Empire announced their arrival. Sareth had gambled that she was not alone in her beliefs, and she had been proven right. The Dreketh Vanguard commander must have recognized that the battle had turned irreversibly against him. Within the hour, the enemy fleet began withdrawing, their ships retreating toward the system's edge and the safety of hyperspace. They had been beaten, not destroyed, but beaten decisively enough that they would report failure to their masters. In the command center, Jinho sank into a chair as the tension of the past day finally released its grip on him. Around him, human officers stared at the tactical displays in stunned silence. She did it, Governor Mayone whispered. The princess actually did it. Jinho touched the crystal hanging around his neck and thought of the child he had served so many years ago. She had grown into something remarkable, not because of what he had taught her, but because she had chosen to remember and to become worthy of the kindness she had been shown later. After the immediate crisis had passed and the Allied fleets had begun establishing a proper defensive perimeter, Sareth contacted him directly. Her face appeared on his personal display, and he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. We lost many warriors today, she said. Good warriors who died protecting people they had never met. I know, Jinho replied. I am sorry. Sareth shook her head. Do not be sorry, she said. When I told my soldiers about you, when I taught them what humans are capable of, they believed me. But today they saw it for themselves. What do you mean? The wounded Valkyrie warrior who fell in the streets of your capital, Sareth said. I received reports that human medics worked through the night to save her life. They did not know our medicine. They did not speak our language, but they refused to let her die. Jinho remembered the chaos of the night, the desperate efforts to save everyone who could be saved. That is what people should do, he said. Echoing words he had spoken 15 years ago, Sareth smiled. And in that moment, she looked almost young again. Yes, she agreed. And now my warriors believe it too. The war room aboard the Valkyrie flagship hummed with tension as representatives from both species gather around the holographic display. Jinho stood beside Sareth at the head of the table, feeling completely out of place among the military officers and politicians who'd assembled to discuss the fate of humanity. Governor Mayong of Varus IV had arrived with a delegation of colonial officials, and their faces showed the strain of the past 24 hours. Admiral Quan Suman, the highest-ranking human military officer in the sector, had been dispatched from the regional command to assess the situation. She was a stern woman with gray streaking her black hair, and her eyes never left Sareth with anything less than suspicion. "Let me understand this correctly," Admiral Quan said, her voice carefully controlled. "You expect us to believe that the Valkyrie Empire, which has ignored humanity for the entirety of our spacefaring history, has suddenly decided to defend us out of the goodness of your hearts?" Sareth's 4 hands rested on the table, her claws clicking softly against the surface in what Jinho had come to recognize as a sign of restrained irritation. "I expect nothing," Sareth replied. "I am telling you what I intend to do, and you may accept our assistance or refuse it. But the Dreketh are coming regardless of your decision. And what do you want in return?" Admiral Quan pressed. "Nothing comes without a price, especially from the Valkyrie." Sareth turned to Jinho, and something in her expression softened. "Tell them," she said. Jinho felt every eye in the room turn toward him, and he swallowed against the dryness in his throat. 15 years ago, I found Princess Sareth injured and alone on my farm," he said. "I did not know who she was, and I did not care. She was a child who needed help, and I helped her." "A lovely story," Admiral Quan said. "But stories do not explain fleets in Valkyrie culture. Saving a life, especially a noble life, creates what they call a blood debt," Jinho continued. "It is not just custom or tradition. It is something sacred to them, something that cannot be ignored or forgotten. So this is about repaying a debt to one farmer?" Governor Mayang asked, confusion clear in her voice. "No," Sareth answered, and she activated the holographic display, bringing up an image of the galaxy with human-controlled space highlighted in blue. "This is about what that farmer represents." She swept her hand through the display, and hundreds of points of light appeared, marking human colonies throughout the sector. The Dreketh Collective has conquered 47 species in the past 2,000 years, Sarah said. "They do not negotiate, and they do not spare. They absorb entire civilizations into their collective, stripping away culture and identity until nothing remains but servants to their empire." "We are aware of the Dreketh threat," Admiral Quan said. "Then you are aware that humanity cannot defeat them alone?" Sareth replied, "Your fleets are young, your technology is primitive by galactic standards, and you have no allies among the elder races, and the Valkyrie wish to be those allies," Governor Mayong said, a note of hope creeping into her voice. "I wish it," Sareth said. "My imperial court is divided." A murmur ran through the human delegation. "Many among my people see humanity as I once did," Sareth continued. "Before Jinho found me in that field, before he showed me what humans truly are, I believed, as my tutors taught me, that younger species were beneath our concern, that their struggles were not our responsibility, that the strong survive and the weak are forgotten." She paused, and her luminous eyes found Jinho's. "But Jinho did not ask whether I was worthy of saving," she said. "He did not calculate whether helping me would benefit him. He saw someone in need, and he acted. Because that is what humans do." Admiral Quan's expression remained skeptical, but something in it had shifted. "Pretty words," she said, "but you said your court is divided. How do we know your fleet will not be recalled the moment battle begins?" "Because these ships answer to me," Sareth said, and her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "I am Crown Princes of the Empire, commander of the 3rd Imperial Fleet, And I have invoked the ancient right of blood debt before the Emperor himself. What does that mean? Governor Mayong asked. It means that I have staked my honor, my position, and my life on this alliance, Sareth answered. If I fail, if humanity falls despite my intervention, I will be stripped of my rank and my name. I will be nothing. Silence fell over the room. Jinho stepped forward, drawing attention to himself once more. I know this is difficult to accept, he said. I am a farmer, not a diplomat, and I cannot promise you that the Valkyrie will always be trustworthy allies. But I can tell you that Sareth is sincere. He looked at her, at the princess who had once been a frightened child in his care, 15 years ago. She was afraid and alone, and I showed her kindness without expecting anything in return, he said. She could have forgotten that moment. She could have become the same cold and distant ruler her people expected. But instead, she spent 15 years working toward this day. Working toward what exactly? Admiral Kwan asked, working toward proving that the kindness shown to her was not wasted, Jinho said. Working toward building enough power and influence to honor a debt that her own culture would have allowed her to ignore, because humanity was too insignificant to matter. He turned to face the human delegation fully. She did not have to come, he said. She did not have to risk her position and her future for a species her empire does not value. But she did, because I helped her once, and she has never forgotten. Admiral Kwan was quiet for a long moment. The Drakith Vanguard, she finally said. How long do we have? Sarath's expression became grave. Our scouts report they will enter this system within 48 hours, she said. The Vanguard fleet consists of approximately 200 vessels, and the main invasion force is perhaps a month behind. We have 40 vessels in this sector, Admiral Kwan said. Even with your fleet, we will be significantly outnumbered. Yes, Sareth agreed. But numbers are not everything. The Valkyrie have been warriors for 10,000 years. And we have faced worse odds. She manipulated the display, showing tactical projections. The Vanguard's purpose is to test defenses and establish a forward position. She continued. If we can break them here, if we can show the Drakith that humanity is not the easy target they expect, we may buy time for reinforcements. Reinforcements from whom? Governor Mayong asked. Sareth hesitated. I have sent word to others in my empire who share my views, she admitted. Fleet commanders and nobles who believe the Valkyrie have become too isolated, too arrogant. There are those who see value in humanity that the Imperial Court refuses to acknowledge. You are gambling that they will come, Admiral Kwan said. Yes, Sareth replied simply. I am gambling everything on the hope that I am not the only Valkyrie who can recognize courage and honor in an unexpected form. The holographic display flickered, and a new alert appeared. Long-range sensors detecting Drakith ships entering the system's outer boundary. They are early, Sareth said, her voice hardening into command. We have less time than I thought. Admiral Kwan straightened, and Jinho saw the moment when suspicion transformed into decision. Very well. Princess Sareth, the Admiral said. Let us discuss coordination between our fleets. It seems we are going to war together whether we plan for it or not. Sareth nodded. And as the military officers began their urgent planning, she caught Jinho's eye across the room. Thank you, she said softly. The words meant for him alone. I have not done anything yet, he replied. You have done everything, she answered. 15 years ago and again today. You have given my people a reason to believe in yours. The war room erupted into activity around them as two species prepared to stand together against an enemy that had never known defeat, and Jinho, the farmer who had started it all with a single act of kindness, stood at the center of it all. The ships hung in the sky like dark clouds made of metal, and Jinho counted them as they emerged from the bright wounds in space, where hyperspace portals had torn through reality. 50 ships. then 100, then more than he could count. The people of Varus IV had never seen such a fleet, and panic spread through the colony like fire through dry grass. Jinho stood in his field with his hands still dirty from the soil and watched the armada take position. Above his world, he knew those ships. He had studied them in the years since Sereth had left, trying to understand the people who had taken her away. Those were Valkyrie warships, each one capable of reducing the entire colony to ash. The colonial alert system screamed to life, and the voice of Governor Mayong crackled through every speaker on the planet. All citizens are advised to proceed to emergency shelters immediately, the governor announced, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. This is not a drill. Repeat. This is not a drill. But Jinho did not move toward the shelters. Something in his chest, some instinct he could not name, told him that he should wait. He touched the crystal that hung around his neck, the one Sereth had given him 15 years ago, and he felt it pulse with warmth against his skin. The colonists ran past his farm in waves, families clutching children and what few possessions they could carry. Jinho's neighbor, an older woman named Cho Yunji, stopped at his gate and shouted at him to come with her. "The Valkyrie are here," she cried. "They have been attacking border colonies for months. Everyone knows war is coming. We must hide." "Go," Jinho told her. "I will follow soon." She looked at him as if he had lost his mind, but she had no time to argue, and she ran with the others toward the underground bunkers that might or might not save them from orbital bombardment. Jinho waited. The smaller ship descended from the fleet like a falling leaf, graceful and silent, and it came not toward the colonial capital where the authorities had gathered, but directly toward his farm. Jinho watched it land in the same field where he had found the escape pod so many years ago. The ramp lowered and warriors emerged in armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. They formed two perfect lines, their movements synchronized with military precision. And then they turned to face him and performed a gesture he had never seen before. Each warrior placed a fist against their chest and bowed their head, and the sound of their voices rose in unison. "Jinho of Varus," they spoke, and his name in their mouths sounded like a prayer. "We honor you." Jinho stood frozen, unable to understand what was happening. Then she appeared. The Valkyrie who walked down the ramp was tall and powerful, her scales now a deep sapphire blue that caught the light like precious stones. She wore armor of silver and white, and upon her head sat a circlet that marked her as royalty. Forearms moved with grace as she approached, and her eyes, those same luminous eyes he remembered from 15 years ago, fixed upon him with an intensity that stole his breath. "Sereth," he whispered. She stopped before him, and for a moment, the crown princes of the Valkyrie Empire looked like the frightened child he had carried through the storm. Then she spoke the words she had spoken when they had parted, the words he had never understood. "Velthur Insari Kethon Marith." Her voice was deeper now, rich with authority and power, but it trembled slightly as she spoke. "I have waited 15 years to translate those words for you," Sereth said. "They mean, I name you kin. My blood answers to yours." Jinho felt his knees weaken. "You came back." He managed to say, "I never truly left," Sereth answered. And she reached out with one of her hands to touch the crystal that hung around his neck. "This beacon has sung to me across the stars every day since I gave it to you. And I have heard it, and I have remembered." Behind her, the warriors maintained their formation, their heads still bowed. "Why are you here?" Jinho asked. "Why have you brought a fleet to our world?" Sarah's expression darkened, and he saw the weight of terrible knowledge in her eyes. "Because war is coming to your people," she said. "The Dreketh Collective has declared humanity a target for annexation, and their invasion fleet is already gathering." Jinho knew of the Dreketh, a brutal empire of conquerors who had swallowed dozens of species into their collective. Humanity had hoped to avoid their attention, to remain too small and insignificant to matter. Why would the Valkyrie care? Jinho asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Your people have never shown interest in humanity before. Syrah smiled then, and it transformed her face from regal severity to something almost warm. My people did not know humans before, she said, but I did. And I have spent 15 years teaching them what I learned from you. She gestured to the warriors behind her. These soldiers are the finest in my fleet. And every one of them knows your name, Jinho of Varys. Because I made certain they would know it. I told them the story of the human farmer who risked everything to save a Valkyrie child he had never met, who asked for nothing in return and expected no reward, who stood against armed warriors of my own kind rather than abandon a stranger to unknown harm. Her voice rose, carrying across the field. I told them that this is what humans are capable of, not because they are mighty or ancient or feared, but because they have something my people had nearly forgotten: the courage to be kind when kindness is neither safe nor expected. The warriors raised their heads now, and Jinho saw something in their eyes that he could scarcely believe. Respect. The Drekith think humanity is weak, Sareth continued. The galactic community thinks humanity is unworthy of protection, but I know better, and I have brought my fleet here to prove them all wrong. You cannot fight a war for us, Jinho protested. Your own people, your own empire. What of them? I am not here to fight your war for you, Sareth answered. I am here to fight beside you, because you fought for me when no one else would. She reached out and took his hand, her scaled fingers warm against his skin. The Valkyrie honored debts of blood above all else, she said. You saved my life, and more than my life. You saved something in me that had been dying since my mother's death. You showed me that kindness is not weakness, that compassion is not foolishness. I am just a farmer, Jinho said. You are a farmer who taught a princess how to be worthy of her crown, Sareth replied behind them. More shuttles were descending from the fleet, carrying warriors and supplies and promises of alliance. The colonial authorities would soon arrive, confused and frightened and desperate for answers. There would be negotiations and arguments and suspicion, because trust between species could not be built in a single day. But for this moment, Jinho stood with the child he had saved, now grown into a leader who had returned to save him in turn. What happens now? He asked. Sareth looked at the sky, where her ships waited like guardian spirits above the world. Now we prepare, she said. The Drekith are coming, and when they arrive, they will learn that humanity does not stand alone. She squeezed his hand. I need you to help me. Jinho, she said, my warriors trust you because I trust you, and the humans trust you because you are one of them. I need you to be the bridge between our peoples. Jinho thought of his quiet life, his peaceful farm, the simple existence he had built for himself on this distant world. Then he thought of Sareth as a child, frightened and wounded, and how he had not hesitated to help her. Yes, he said, and above them, the fleet began its preparations for war. The storm came without warning that night, and Part Jinho ran through his fields as lightning split the sky above the colony world of Varys IV. He was 23 years old then, a farmer on a frontier world at the edge of human space. And he had seen many storms in his 5 years on this planet, but he had never seen anything fall from the sky the way that object did, burning through the clouds like a dying star, before it crashed into his eastern field with a fey sound that shook the ground beneath his feet. Jinho stopped running and stared at the column of smoke rising against the purple sky. His first thought was that he should call the colonial authorities and report the crash. His second thought was that whoever or whatever was inside that wreckage might not survive long enough for help to arrive. He made his choice in the span of a single heartbeat and ran toward the smoke instead of away from it. The crater was not large, and the object at its center was clearly some kind of escape pod. Though its design was unlike anything Jinho had ever seen, the metal was black and seamless, covered in script that glowed faintly, even through the scorch marks left by atmospheric entry. Jinho approached carefully, the rain soaking through his clothes and the thunder drowning out every other sound. He found the hatch on the side of the pod, and it opened at his touch as if it had been waiting for him inside. Illuminated by the flickering emergency lights, he found a child at least. He thought it was a child. The being was small, perhaps the size of a human 8-year-old, with 4 arms folded against a narrow chest and scales that shimmered between blue and silver, even in the dim light. The face was vaguely humanoid, with large eyes that remained closed and a mouth that looked capable of speech, blood the color of liquid. Copper leaked from wounds across the child's body, and Jinho could see that several of the scales had been torn away, leaving raw flesh beneath. He recognized the species from news feeds and educational programs. This was a Valkyrie, a member of one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. The Valkyrie were proud warriors who had built an empire spanning hundreds of worlds. They were also known for their absolute disdain for younger species. And humanity was very young indeed by galactic standards. The Valkyrie had no diplomatic relations with human governments. They considered humans barely worth acknowledging. A primitive species that had only recently stumbled into the stars, Jinho knew that helping this child could be seen as an insult, an interference in Valkyrie affairs that might bring consequences he could not imagine. He lifted the child from the pod anyway and carried her through the storm toward his home. The Valkyrie child woke 3 days later, and her first instinct was to try to kill him. Jinho had been sitting beside the bed he had made for her, changing the bandages on her wounds, when her eyes snapped open and her 4 hands seized his throat with surprising strength. He did not fight back. He simply looked into her terrified eyes and spoke in the calmest voice he could manage. "You are safe here," he said. "I am not going to hurt you." She held him for a long moment, her grip tight enough to leave bruises. And then something in her expression shifted. She released him and pulled away, pressing herself against the wall and watching him with those large, luminous eyes. "Where am I?" she asked, and her voice was high and thin with fear. "My farm," Jinho answered, rubbing his throat. "On a human colony world called Varus 4, human," she repeated, and the word carried a weight of confusion and something that might have been discussed. "Yes," Jinho said without apology. "And you are Valkyrie, and you were badly hurt. And I helped you, because that is what people should do when they find someone who needs help." The child stared at him as if he had spoken in a language she did not understand. Over the following weeks, Jinho learned that her name was Sareth, and that she was indeed a child by Valkyrie standards, equivalent to a human of perhaps 10 or 11 years. She would not tell him how she came to be in that escape pod, or why she had been wounded so severely, but he gathered from her careful silences and her fearful glances at the sky that someone had tried to kill her. She was noble blood. That much she admitted, though she refused to say more assassins had destroyed her transport, and she had barely escaped with her life. Jinho did not press for details. He simply cared for her wounds, fed her what food she could tolerate, and gave her space to heal in both body and spirit. At first, Sareth treated him with cold suspicion, as if she expected his kindness to reveal itself as a trap at any moment. She spoke to him only when necessary, and watched his every movement with the wariness of a hunted animal. But humans are patient creatures when they choose to be, and Jinho had learned patience from the land itself. He talked to her about his crops and his life on the colony, about the stars he could see from his porch at night, and the dreams he had once held before he came to this distant world. He asked her nothing and demanded nothing. And slowly, so slowly, Sareth began to trust him. She started asking questions about humans and their strange customs. She watched him work in the fields and asked why he would choose such a difficult life. She tasted the vegetables he grew and declared them acceptable, which Jinho suspected was high praise from a Valkyrie one evening. As they sat on his porch watching the twin moons rise, she told him about her homeworld, about the great cities that floated above crimson seas and the warrior traditions that had shaped her people for 10,000 years. Her voice grew soft when she spoke of her mother, who had died when Sareth was very young. And Jinho understood then that this proud alien child was also deeply lonely. The Valkyrie retrieval team arrived exactly 21 days after the crash. Their ship descended from the sky like a blade, sleek and dangerous, and warriors in armor that seemed to drink the light poured out of it with weapons raised. Jinho stood on his porch with Sareth behind him, and he did not move. The commander of the team approached, a massive Valkyrie with scars across his face and contempt in his eyes. "Human," the commander said, "you will surrender the child to us immediately. I will know first that she will be safe." Jinho answered. The commander's eyes widened, and then narrowed with fury. "You dare to question us? You dare to make demands? You are nothing, human, a farmer on a worthless world, and you will do as you are told." Jinho felt fear then, real and cold in his chest. But he did not step aside. "She came to me hurt and afraid," he said. "I will not hand her over to anyone until I know she will not be hurt again." For a moment, the commander looked ready to kill him where he stood. But then Sareth stepped forward and spoke in rapid Valkyrie, a voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible from someone so young. The commander's expression shifted from rage to something Jinho could not read. And finally, reluctantly, he lowered his head. "She will be safe," the commander said through gritted teeth. "She is blood of the Imperial House, and she will be returned to her family with all honors." Sareth turned to Jinho then, and he saw tears in her eyes. Though she held herself with the dignity of the royalty she apparently was, she pressed something into his hand, a small crystal that pulsed with inner light, and she spoke words in her own language that he did not understand. Then she walked to the Valkyrie ship without looking back, and the warriors followed. And Jinho stood alone on his porch as the vessel rose into the sky and vanished among the stars. He looked at the crystal in his hand and wondered if he would ever know what her words had meant. 15 years passed, and Jinho still farmed the same land, and the crystal still hung on a cord around his neck. He had never learned the meaning of Sarath's final words to him. Then, one morning, he walked outside to begin his work, and the sky was filled with ships.